So good morning, everybody. So we're here in the session Rise Against Violence, coming together to end inhuman humanity and to have a good discussion. First of all, I would like to invite you, please, to come closer to us. You know, if you're not afraid, then we have a little bit, say, more interaction, and that is what we would like to have during this session, some more interaction. And if you're hidden away in those dark corners, we can't see you that well. Yeah, oh, that's good. That's great. Okay, so once again, my name is Kees van Baar, and I'm the Dutch Human Rights Ambassador for the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And I'm very honored to moderate this session. I was asked by Chris Malouris from UNAIDS, and this session is being organized by UNAIDS and IAS. And I think it's important to stress that it is about human rights. Because when we talk about HIV/AIDS, you know, we talk a lot about stigma and discrimination, and that is true. But what is true as well, I mean, there are a lot of people, you know, who are already living in communities that are being discriminated against and stigmatized. And what we see then is because they are in the gay community or transgender, they're sex workers, drug users, and what we see then is because they are discriminated against and stigmatized, you know, they even don't have access to healthcare. They're afraid to go there, and I think that's a big problem. It's not only a problem because of, I think, of a human perspective, but it's also a problem from the public health perspective. And what we see these days, and I see it when I travel to several countries. I've been to Indonesia, I've been to the Philippines, but also what I hear and what we see, what's going on in Chechnya, Russia, or in Tanzania, that also violence. There's a lot of violence against those key populations. And even if you have that violence, I mean, and you are, you know, access to health is a problem, not only for when you want to be treated for HIV/AIDS, but also just to enter a hospital because you're being raped or whatsoever by a gang and you're a homosexual, for example. You know, then even they look upon you and like, oh, that's you. And that prevents people from going to healthcare. And when there is violence as well, what we see, there are huge programs when it comes to gender-based violence. And I think, and what I see, that's picked up tremendously. But even those programs, you know, sometimes they're closed for people from the key populations, from transgenders, from drug users, sex workers. And that is something, say, I would like to discuss in this session. And we have a panel over here, and we have, say, starting from the right, we have Vitaly Duma, and he's from the Eurasian Coalition on Male Health. He is the executive director. We have here Steve Letsika. He's from the South African National AIDS Council. He's a co-chairperson and represents the civil society in the council. To my left, we have Jay Mulucha. Jay has set up the Femme Alliance Uganda and is the director of the Femme Alliance and is a very good basketball player, I must say. And then we have Bikas Gurung from Nepal, but living in Thailand. And he is leading the Asia network of people who use drugs in Bangkok. And I think, this is representatives from key populations who I would like to have a discussion with, and with you, with the audience, you know, on what is the situation right now for those key populations who are, say, that vulnerable and, you know, oppressed by or legal or policy framework and criminalized as well because of their behavior. And I would like to see, what is the situation right now, the first round. The second round, say, of the discussion, I would like to see, what can we do? Because in the end, the title is Rise Against Violence. What can we do to prevent violence and to tackle the violence? So, and I think we could start now with, well, I should say, we have Florence as well, Florence Gonzalez, but she is not there yet. I don't know if she would be there. Florence is from Argentina, is a sex worker, and that would be, say, a very good addition to the panel already, but I haven't seen her yet, and so I hope she will come, but when she comes, she will sit in the chair next to Bikas, and then we continue the discussion. But I would like to start with Jay Mulucha from Uganda. Jay, what the situation in Uganda, and with you're a trans man in Uganda, and how do you see the situation when it comes to discrimination, stigmatization, and the violence?
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here on this panel, and I would like to talk about the situation as a trans man and as a person from Uganda and East Africa. There has been a disabling legal environment in my country. Although the Ministry of Health in Uganda and other non-government actors have made it positive strides towards attaining universal access to healthcare services by all persons, including transgender persons, we are still faced with a problem of ambiguous laws and policies that further restrict us as a community from accessing services. These laws and policies, like the Penal Code Act in Uganda, the Penal Code Act Section 145, sets very ambiguous terms like the order of nature, which leaves much to be desired about what is natural and what is unnatural. What is the order of nature and what is not the order of nature. Such laws make it hard for some health care providers to give us health services because they have this fear that if they work with us or if they give us health services, they will be penalized for working with us and giving us the services. So we end up not getting the services as we need them. As more perceptive, you probably know by now, Africa and Uganda is generally still suffering from a stagnant culture and social setting. Our culture and society is one that defines how each biological gender should behave in a society largely built on prejudice and stigmatization of people with different ways of life, especially transgender persons whose gender identity is seen to be in conflict with their birth-assigned gender. This culture and social norms go a long way in determining how individuals react to diversity in our societies. Unfortunately, most of our healthcare providers are still held back by the same denying services to transgender persons based on what their culture dictates to them than what the public health approach clearly spells out. I will tell just a small story about me. There is a time I got sick, seriously sick, and I needed immediate medical attention. So my partner and I walked into a nearby health center for medical services. But when we arrived, we talked to the nurse who was there, and then the nurse, first thing she asked, because in Uganda, transgender persons haven't yet done hormonotherapy, they haven't yet done the surgeries, so we don't usually pass so well. So I got questions, and this lady started asking me, are you a man? Are you a woman? I mean, I've come to access health services. Why are you asking me questions? Give me what I need. It doesn't matter whether I'm a man or a woman. I haven't come to introduce myself to you. So we walked in, and then finally she accepted me. She gave me a seat. And then instead of attending to me, she went on to call other people to come and see, as if I was an alien, as if I was an animal, a tourist attraction. I needed services at that time. And then they had to even call the doctor from wherever he was to come and assess me. For what? Then at the end of it all, it ended up, they ended up involving the police. And because in that period of time in Uganda, we were being hunted down like animals. So what we had to do, we had to just bribe those people before the police came in, and we disappeared. Because we didn't want the police to be involved, it would have been a very difficult case. This is seriously bad because it affects us as transgender persons, and other people who are seeking for medical attention. This makes us even go to this extent of treating ourselves, as in prescribing medication for ourselves, which puts us at risk. And you know the end results of all this. So it's kind of serious. Yeah, and there is also this kind of stigma and discrimination, even from the wider LGBT community. We are still struggling with acceptance, and this situation has only led to an increase in cases of self-stigma, which have often led to escalated cases of drug abuses that have also led to cases of severe depression and mental illness. This has only led to an increase of exposure by our community to the HIV and AIDS epidemic because of the resulting activities like abuse of drugs that our community results to as a result of depression and deteriorating mental health. We also have this thing of trans men or LGBT people can't, LGBTQ people can't get AIDS. I mean, I'm a trans man, and my gender doesn't determine my sexuality, my sexual preferences. So if you come and you tell me that I'm at a low risk of getting HIV, what do you mean? We have got all these challenges, and I mean, there is a lot of rape, collective and corrective rape that is happening, and this, you know, people judging us has made us stay even inside. We are not able to come out and speak because we know a lot of questions are going to come up. I'm a trans man, and I'm HIV positive, or I'm pregnant, and everyone is going to start asking, a trans man having HIV, or a trans man is pregnant, you know, and how? That's what they always ask. How can a trans man get HIV? Which has left a lot of trans men in the closet, not to come out to access health services because of the questions that are always asked. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay. And it also shows that your story, that it is not only that people feel legally, have legal problems because of the law, that, you know, they are refrained from helping, trans men or people from the LGBT community, but it's also social. You know, it's definitely also a social stigma and discrimination as well, what you see. Thank you. The next one, we go to see and hear Bikas. Bikas.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Bikas Gurung, and I work at the Asian Network of People Who Use Drugs. Slides, until we get the slides. May I have a show of hands if any one of us in this room is from the community of people who use drugs. You don't have to raise if you don't want, but if there is anyone who can openly say I'm a drug user, if anyone? No? Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm really happy that we have a very new group of people who wants to learn about what is happening to the drug users. I'm sure you already know what's happening to the drug users. So, okay, I have a slide here. So, I'm really happy that in this session I don't have to really go in deep into the harm reduction and HIV lens and all those things. It's about rise against the violence, and the title itself was kind of very interesting for me because I don't have to talk about HIV and all those things, because there's a lot more going on with the lives of people who use drugs, and we know it as the war on drugs, which is a war on us. So I've written there bullets, wrong policies, and silence. I'll try to explain it more. So in this world, at present, the people who use drugs are currently suffering from three major crises. The first one being the over-criminalization that is taken by some governments, interpreted by some governments in very negative way, that it results in approaches like war on drugs, extrajudicial killings of people who use drugs, arbitrary arrest and detention, torture and abuse kind of thing. The other thing that people who use drugs are suffering with is the overdose due to the contaminated drugs that they have been using, or due to the polydrug poisoning that they have to use. And this third thing, the third crisis that people who use drugs has to suffer or have been suffering is all these infections and hepatitis C, HIV, and all these infections, bloodborne infections, or the airborne infections like tuberculosis, and STI as well. So these are the three major crises that drug users are facing today. And when drug users are facing this, we are literally in a war. We all know that. I don't have to actually explain a lot, and I don't really want to explain a lot, because we are on a war, and it's happening in the Philippines, it's happening in the Bangladesh, it's happening in the Indonesia, it's happening in Sri Lanka now, it's happening in Cambodia. So in all these countries, people who use drugs are being brutally killed like animals, and or even arrested. If you just see with the Philippines, then it's so many people that we have lost these individual lives, and it has become a number. So we are on a war, and every day we are losing our people, and we are losing our community. And for us, for a drug user like me, or any one of us in the region who are working in Asian region or in other parts of the world also, we are losing our friends, we are losing our family. And it seems like to the other actors in this world who are also living together with us, it seems like they have been just numbers. It's all about numbers. For us, it's friends. 22,000 friends have died or have been brutally killed in the Philippines, and it has become a number all over, for all of us. So that is something that we need to really raise. And the other thing is about the torture and abuse that happens to the people who use drugs. So as I said, I'm really happy that I'm not talking about HIV anymore. So the criminalization also has resulted in treatment in form of forced compulsory detentions. It is estimated that in any one point of time in Asia, at least 500,000 people are detained in these forced compulsory detention centers. So, and there is evidence available. It's not that we do not have evidence. If evidence would be the solution, I wouldn't be speaking right here. We wouldn't be have to like listen here, sitting here. So evidence has not been the problem. We have piles and piles of evidence that even it's not coming from drug user groups. It's coming from agencies like UN or DC that only 10 to 11% of people who use drugs may have problem with their drug use. They may develop drug dependency and which may need treatment as a support. But everyone has been like arrested without fair trial. They have been detained in this center. So for 2 years, for 3 years. So this is the thing that is going on in the region. The other thing that is happening in terms of human rights violations is the urine testing. Urine testings are supposed to happen in non-clinical settings. So it is happening in a non-clinical settings through law enforcement officers who are not trained, who are just using it, who do not know. And if there is a false positive, it's instead of considering it as an indicator to further process, it's directly taken as an evidence and sent to these compulsory detentions. So no matter if that person has used for the first time, sometimes these test kits turns false positive if you have even like used maybe any medicine that has ephedrine, because ice or crystal methamphetamine has ephedrine. So this is something that is happening, and the stigma and discrimination, the social exclusion of people who use drugs, that happens all over the world, I guess. In Asia, if you talk about people who use drugs, their families are the one who have been like asking these law enforcement or the compulsory detention center staffs to actually arrest or kidnap their sons or daughters wherever they find them. So this is how it has grown, the stigma and discrimination in healthcare settings. There's so many human rights violations. If we start this kind of like listing the human rights violations that people who use drugs are facing at this moment, as we speak now, also like it would be like the whole 1.5 hour session would not be enough for us. So the other thing is like the Philippines is doing that. Bangladesh is also killing people who use drugs, and we are trying to like advocate it against it. There are people who are inside the Philippines and working in so dangerous or terrible or horrible situation that their lives are in danger. So these frontline human rights defenders do not have any safety and security. So, and our communities who are trying to, we have people who use drugs communities in the Philippines who have been trying to support their other peers to get out of the prison, or they have this watch list where if you have your name in the watch list, you will either be killed or you have to surrender, and you don't know when you will be released from this prison. Yeah. So these are the things that are happening, and there was this section that sometimes we can be interactive, so I wanted to ask you a question, like, why do you think like these things are happening like in the Philippines, in Cambodia, Indonesia, anyone? If you have any kind of answer, like I would really be happy to listen that. Anyone? Okay.
Perhaps we go back in the second round.
Okay.
Yeah?
And just,
yeah.
So, just I will finish with the answer. So one pattern that we have realized in all these countries is the elections. In the Philippines, it was the election when President Duterte started all his campaigns and all his promises to kill people who use drugs and do all those things. So after Philippines, there was Indonesia, where President Jokowi started saying that he would, our law enforcement officers could shoot at sight all these drug dealers and drug users they find. And then in Cambodia also. So everywhere it has happened right like before the elections. And drug users are expendable people for our society. So whenever there are these kind of situations where the politicians need power and they need to they need to have their seats, or their party needs to win, then they have to show their political a tough stance and blame all the misery, all the problems of that country, like unemployment or young generation getting into drug use or whatever problems are there. They have to have a scapegoat to just blame them, and then whoever is blamed, the politicians have to show a tough stance that they will take care of them, and public are so much like happy and dumb to just vote them. In the Philippines, if you just check it, 90% of the Filipino publics had supported, actually. He won by landslide, even though when he was promising that he will kill each and every one of them, and then he was asking public to have gun and shoot drug users, and they would be rewarded. That was his promises, and he is doing that, and nobody is able to stop him. So that is what's happening right now. So people are being killed by bullets, people are being killed by wrong policies like criminalization, and people are being killed due to the silence that many international organizations and all these influencing governments and UN agencies. So this silence is the thing that is killing our community.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Vikas. And I think, when you talk about, because indeed, when we talk about violence, I mean the violence, indeed, when it comes to drug users, but I think also to drug dealers and the whole drug issue, then it's really about bullets, what you see, at least in the Philippines. I think in other countries there might be also a distinction between those who use drugs and those who produce it and who deal with it. But perhaps we come to that in the second round, as such. I would like to ask Steve Letsike. Steve, the situation in South Africa, with you can call the perspective as well as from the women's perspective, as from the LGBTI perspective.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Chair. I want to just maybe pick up the word that the latter speaker used, which is silence. And I think maybe we need to start from there, because for so many years, there's been silence. And I think I would look at both South Africa, the region as well, and also because in my capacity as the co-chair of the Commonwealth Equality Network as well, there's been quite high levels of silence for so many years around same-sex practicing people. And I think over time, with literature, with people coming out and so forth, then we're seeing the silence being broken, because people can't keep quiet forever. But I think we need to look at the long histories of prejudice in many of the countries that we come from as well. Particularly in the African countries, even in South Africa, at some point we had criminalization of homosexual act. And I think that came from the colonial laws and the legacy of colonial laws that still exist now, even in our own spaces. And I think where you look at South Africa, where we have a very liberal constitution that does not criminalize homosexual act, no one under our own constitutional clauses should be and will be discriminated on the basis of their sexual orientation. But our neighboring countries, of course, still criminalizes homosexual act. And I think that's the base. But what are the three things that generates emotion, particularly in Africa? We are talking about how do we deal with the inhuman and how do we rise together to address inhuman humanities. There are three things that generate emotions. One, when you speak about culture, a lot of Africans, a lot of countries still use, or hide behind culture as means to silence people. This is not our culture and so forth. And, those stories we know. Even today, how culture has evolved over the years and so forth. But we're talking about human lives. Two, religion. Same how religion is used to, violate human rights. The third one that raises emotions is when you speak about rights itself. And what we find quite interesting is that a lot of our own state and countries are actually contradicting themselves, because many of our states have signed and have signed the treaties, international treaties like Universal Declaration of Human Rights and so forth. But at the same time, they are the ones that violate the rights of citizens in their diversity. And I wanted to bring that perspective a bit, because we need to then say, what is the current situation? Now, the current situation that is based on, you have LGBTI persons, you've got sex workers, you've got injecting drugs. We're talking about human beings. That's the base. Secondly, we're talking about citizens of these countries, where they are violated, and their freedoms of association, of expression, their rights on its own are enshrined within the constitutions of our own countries. But these rights are violated on a daily basis. Now, what is happening in terms of the livelihood of individuals, before we even speak about the impact all of this have on HIV? Now, the livelihood of LGBTI persons and anyone who's marginalized is impacted. A lot of people don't have access to economic opportunities, work. A lot of people don't have access to education. A lot of people don't have access to services. And we've seen, when we started, in South Africa, and we looked at, let's understand the needs of LGBTI persons. And we had research conducted, in the early 2000s, and we called the Levels of Empowerment Study, which actually told us exactly what is currently happening within the constitutional framework that we had. But one is that a lot of young LGBTI persons in school, 71% of LGBTI persons in school were discriminated, even when you have a constitutional protection. Two is that a lot of LGBTI persons, 12%, did not go for health. In fact, they were rejected by health services. And 6% of the 12 delayed seeking health services because of fear of discrimination and stigma. And we're seeing that this trend moving even in the region, because people will not present themselves because they fear stigma, discrimination out of. In fact, Jay made reference to his own experience in the clinical setting of how people, you walk in and you would be subjected to horror than being provided services. And that's exactly what's happening. But part of all of this is that even within the constitutional framework, where are your rights protected and fulfilled? That to an extent where there's reporting of incidences and where is the justice that will help remedy or redress the situation. And those are the kind of issues that we are battling with. But I want to contextualize some of the issues when we speak about what are the contributing factors. If you take religion or culture, there's a word such as patriarchy. We're talking about violence. Violence, it's about power. It's about domination. And patriarchy is a contributing factor to what we're seeing as violence. Now, we need to even ask ourselves, when we respond to HIV, what kind of agenda do we want to influence? Because HIV, the drivers of the epidemic itself, it's social, structural, behavioral, and biological. So where do we need to nip it in the bud to address these inhuman realities? When we speak in this case of patriarchy, we need to actually deal with it, because then we need a feminist agenda to it. Part of it is that you look at the high levels of violence against women. And I don't want to just highlight only just LGBTI. In South Africa, out of 9 women, 1 only gets to report rape. You're talking about a very broad legal framework that protects and fulfills, but women still don't feel that they can report a rape. Out of 3 women, One, of course, by the age of 21, would have been raped. So there's a high level of rape, there's a high level of violence that exists. Women are not safe in their own space, and we need to confront the social realities. And part of it is that who owns the response? You know, we need to ask ourselves is that at this level, HIV still carries the face of women. I mean, we have released evidence, and you know, just 2 days ago, Human Science Research Council in South Africa was telling us that we need to put men into testing, men into treatment, men into suppressing the virus. But at the same time, there are intersecting issues that we must think about, that we must still address. So for me, I think, what are the key things that we, and population that we must focus on first at that, and key population that we must also elevate to give attention to. And very lastly, because sometimes when we use the acronym LGBTI, we think everyone is everyone in the LGBTI is LGBTI, you know, but it's population, and that must also be looked at individually because their needs are different. You know, lesbian women are left out in the HIV response. That is a serious concern, no matter what the biological evidence that has been suggested decades ago. But if we actually look at the realities now, that reality is changing, and we're seeing more and more lesbian women coming out positive. We need to interrogate that. In the HIV, this conference itself, nobody speaks about lesbian women. So we need to speak about that. Secondly, gay men, of course, evidence is there, and we've seen the prevalence, and more research tells us that. But I want to isolate transgender persons, and Jay spoke about it. Transgender persons are 49 times higher of contracting HIV than any adult of reproductive age. And these are some of the things that we must think about. We're talking violence, high levels of violence, and gender-based violence is the driver of the HIV epidemic itself. So how do we deal with violence, but also how do we deal with HIV in this case? And at the same time, we're talking about criminalization of these countries where we're talking about prevention. If we're going to prevent new HIV infection, that means we must also change the laws. So structural drivers must be adhered and addressed to. So the prevention coalition, global prevention coalition suggests by 2020, we must cut new infections, global new infections, you know, from 500,000 to 200,000. That's in 18 months. That means we must already have target for how we want to cut criminalization laws by 2020 as well. So we must have a target for repealing these colonial laws. And I think that, for me, is very crucial. And we'll speak about what kind of response, and I'll speak later about what South Africa has done to respond to some of the challenges.
Thanks. Thanks, Steve. I think, what you say itself, I mean, you talk about also, say, the legal challenges, but what you showed as well in South Africa, I mean, even though you don't have, you know, the laws are all there, you know, and it's, the laws say don't talk about stigma and discrimination, then you see that socially there is still a problem, indeed. Vitali, say, another region of the world, Eurasia, say, and your network, men having sex with men, transgenders as well, your key populations. So what are the problems in your part of the world?
Well, I will start with a short intro, as banal as it can sound, but our region is really diverse. We are diverse culturally. We have predominantly Muslim countries, predominantly Christian, and predominantly atheist countries, as my own country of Estonia. Luckily, 80% of people there don't identify with any religion. But we have also diverse political aspirations of countries. We have European Union member countries, we have EU accession states, and others who don't want to go this way. But what unites this big region of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, or Southeastern and Eastern Europe and Central Asia, is strong conservative backlash, political backlash against human rights, including against LGBT rights. In the region, we still have two countries who have the old anti-sodomy law. Russia, with its infamous gay propaganda ban, leads the regional effort to reintroduce de facto criminalization, although they call it, it's not a criminalization, it's protection of whatever, of whoever, but of course we understand, and the reality there, it is de facto criminalization of our population. And the political movement or backlash against human rights in the region is clearly met by the societal attitudes. You just mentioned the case of Chechnya of last year, and it is a clear example how politicians use the widespread homophobia in the society. It was both local authorities and our own families who were hunting and killing gay men in Chechnya. And this case is not over. Just 2 weeks ago, we heard that a young man from Chechnya, refugee in St. Petersburg and in the city of Russia, while he was waiting for relocation to a safe country, he was kidnapped by his own family. Luckily, human rights defenders were able to get him back before he was brought back to Chechnya, so he was saved. But it clearly shows that the hunt to gay men in Chechnya is not over, and the problems are still there. And again, case of Chechnya is not the only one. We have last year we had reports of violent attacks of police against LGBT people in Azerbaijan. Tajikistan and Belarus, two countries, have unofficial or official register of gay men. And it's not only in this east of the region that we face this violence. Quarter of all LGBT people in European Union have faced verbal or physical violence. So, and of course, it's the violence against LGBT people is not only in our region; it's around the world. But I am talking about the region. These were examples of acute violence, but we also have to consider the chronic violence. Yes, as any marginalized community, we LGBT people and gay men live in a constant fear of violence. We don't hold hands of people who we love because of the fear of violence. We adapt our own behavior. We adapt our tactics to survive. As me, as a person, as an openly gay person, and as a person of color living back in Russia a few years ago, I knew exactly where I should not go. Where I should not manifest my sexuality, my homosexuality, if I want to survive. So, and the link between the homophobia and our behavior is clear. Steve mentioned the link between the discrimination, violence, and economic situations. Back in 2016, the World Bank has published a really good study on effect of homophobia on Indian economy, where they estimated up to $1.7 billion are lost because of homophobia. Just in the beginning of this year, Eric Lamontagne from UNAIDS and other co-authors published a study on effect of homophobia on public health, where they estimated the increased homophobia in society leads to earlier deaths of HIV-positive men. Not leads, but is linked, we cannot say leads in the scientific research, is linked, is associated with, higher homophobia is associated with earlier deaths of HIV-positive men. And ECOM, my organization, we just finished a unique study in our region on effect of internal homophobia on our behavior, on our public health and HIV behavior in this sense. We took a hypothesis that in a homophobic surrounding, our behavior changes, and the results were clear that people with lower self-esteem, with lower acceptance of homosexuality in this case, in the case of our study, people with lower acceptance of homosexuality tend to less often seek health services, tend to less often seek life-saving treatment. And of course, the link between homophobia and violence and HIV epidemic is very clear in the region, in our region. In the country of Georgia, which is a predominantly a very strong Orthodox Christian country, 5 years ago, local Christian Orthodox priests have led a violent mob against LGBT pride. It was 20,000 angry people, angry men mainly, against a small bunch of 20 LGBT activists. So now in this country of Georgia, we have 22% of HIV prevalence in gay men. And finally, the state discrimination and societal stigma and homophobia leads to ignoring our needs, not only in the day-to-day lives, but also in the HIV response. We are omitted from discussing and planning HIV strategies in the region, and most importantly, our needs are ignored by budgeting the national strategies. So in the whole region of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, almost no government funds HIV prevention services to gay men and trans people. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think that one of the issues why is also there's so much attention for, say, the Eurasian region right now at the conference. But at the same time, it's a pity that officials, say, are not there, so many.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. But say, if we talk about, say, rise against violence, then we should do something. You know, we should act. Because, I mean, you said, you know, the countries, they, you know, the violence they use against drug users, drug producers, drug dealers. Might it be a solution also to talk to these countries and more or less say make a separation between those who produce and deal drugs and the users? It's one of the things, for example, I discussed while I was in Indonesia. You know, when they put people to death, say, on the drug dealers and the drug producers. And we discussed it, and I invited them to come to the Netherlands to see how we dealt with drug users and with and how we dealt with it, but to separate it from each other. I mean, that is, you know, and then because the drug users really say, I mean, for them it's human rights. I mean, and you also can see sometimes as they, you know, what they do, it's also a result of what drug producers and dealers do. Might that be an issue? Because the situation in the Philippines and Indonesia is quite different.
Okay. I had prepared some points, but before going to that, I'll first answer the user versus the seller kind of question. So I could share some of the experiences from Portugal or Vietnam, where they have been using this system of, they have this quantity threshold, and with that quantity threshold, they try to determine who is a user and who is a drug trafficker or a seller. And in the course of drug use, most of the drug users may have been a seller as well, not with the intent or the motive of earning money or kind of like ruining the society, but with the intent of having his next dose with the money that he gets it from. So first thing is, we need to first differentiate between these kind of things. And the second thing is the quantity threshold. Like if we talk about Portugal, they have decriminalized all forms of drugs in 2001, and there is this very good report of the Portugal decriminalization for the 10 years, the effects of the decriminalization from the 10 years. So what Portugal did was, if anyone is caught with a drug that amounts to 10 days of his personal use, then he will still be considered a user, and he will be sent to a dissuasion committee, and there will be his voluntary choice to select health services or whatever. So, but in Vietnam also decriminalized drug use. They have a different kind of quantity threshold. So this is where the tricky part comes. So Vietnam decriminalized drug use. They do not criminalize. They have administrative sanctions, but the quantity threshold is very, very less than that of Portugal's. So when someone is caught, the quantity threshold is so little that any drug user would have that quantity. So once they are caught, they will be prosecuted. If they have less than the quantity threshold, then they will be sent to the compulsory detention center for 2 years for administrative sanction, which is actually worse than the prison. So this is something that we need to clarify in terms of this user and seller, and that even if someone is selling, then we still need to identify the intent of the selling, if it was for his personal
So that
use.
would be a solution only if you have your drug for you should be a little bit higher. And your other points which you had for solutions?
Yes.
Maybe point them out briefly.
Okay. So that question took my little bit of time, so I'm going to take a little bit more time. So
still, it doesn't add to your time.
I have actually four solutions. There could be more, but we have been given 5 minutes, and I have to finish it within 5 minutes. So I have 4 solutions that is in a way pragmatic and could be done. The first solution is a little bit ambitious and difficult, that needs everyone's support who is silent. So the first one is to move away from the drug-free world targets. So the whole drug debate, the whole drug policies, all the national level narcotics control law is governed by the 3 UN conventions. So there are 3 drug conventions of United Nations, which in its preamble says that drug users are social evil and they should be combated by any means possible. So this dictates every nation's national laws around drug laws. My country, Nepal, was like heaven until 70s. All these hippie generations and everyone used to come there and then celebrate all the natural drugs we had in Nepal. So and then the global northern countries as well as the drug conventions were imposed in my country, and since 1976, it has been criminalized so badly. So we have to move away from drug-free target also because it is not a real target. You cannot have a drug-free world or a drug-free society. Drugs has been part of our society since the first day of evolution of the human beings or maybe the plants. So drugs has been part of our society, tradition, culture in many ways, even in the lives of animals, if you go and study all these documents that are available. So it is these things that we have to change, and we need to break the silence. So many countries have started to kind of started becoming progressive, like Canada or has legalized cannabis recently, and Portugal being the first one to decriminalize all form of drugs, and the Philippines. The spectrum is so extreme. The Philippines, who is killing 22,000 people, and the Canada or the Portugal decriminalizing all form of drugs. So these things are not discussed in the Commission of Narcotics Drugs meeting that happens in March every year. The governments or the member states every year comes there. The progressive countries will not speak about their whatever progress. The regressive country will also not speak about whatever they are doing. So they just have a consensus, again, go back to their countries with the same thing. So this needs to be changed. And the second thing within the UN system is, I'm sorry, I'm taking all the time.
Yeah.
So the second thing within the UN system is the human rights system. Human rights being one of the 3 pillars of United Nations, it's so less prioritized. And if you ever, I know some of you may have tried, if you have ever tried to submit a human rights report, UPR submissions, or any kind of submission, it's so difficult. Why is these kind of like very important reports so difficult and so hard to develop and submit when it's one of the 3 pillars? So it needs to be like kind of a mobile app. So these drug conventions are there for more than 60 years now. They have failed. In 2009, this government set a target that they will have drug-free world in 10 years, and 2019 is the 10th year, and we have more drugs, more type of drugs than ever before. We have more drug users than ever before. So this is the situation. The drug market that they wanted to dismantle has flourished more than ever before. So
okay, so this is the point. Still, how many points left?
I can stop, but I have 3 more that is important.
Shall we do that perhaps in the aftermath? Yeah. Because we have limited time and other people coming into the room, say, for the next meeting. I would like to go to Vitaly. What could be, say, a reaction from your side? What can we do? What I noticed, I was at the Robert Carr Network Fund, and people told us about the network that was set up, say, the network of networks, your network, but also with the sex workers network and others. Is that a response?
Yes, absolutely. And I also wanted to follow up on Steve's commentary that we need to understand intersectionality of our issues. I mean, of we as key affected populations, LGBT people who use drugs, sex workers, people who live with HIV. We face discrimination and violence basically based on the same societal myth. For example, with sex workers, we share the same prejudice and the desire to hamper our bodily autonomy. So understanding the intersectionality makes us stronger sorry, I'm just rambling. So understanding our common problems has led us in the region of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, for example, to build stronger alliances. You just mentioned one example of the Robert Carr, but it's not only the Robert Robert Carr funds that we made our consortium or alliance or whatever you called it for. We understand that only together we can work to counteract the widespread violence against key populations. So we, for already, I think for close to 10 years, we work closely between different key populations network as my own Eurasian Coalition on Mental Health, Harm Reduction Association in the region, Sex Workers' Rights Advocacy Network in the region, Regional Union of People living with HIV in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. So this is one of the key that we need to understand and to try to understand each other. So in the region, in Eastern Europe, I think as everywhere in the world, gay people or gay men were the first to face HIV epidemic. And we came then to the HIV responses as first of all the key populations. For example, I myself started my HIV activism working in harm reduction, and it gave me insight into the problems that are experienced by people who use drugs. So, and we now share our own experience, our own personal experience with our peers from communities of people who live, who use drugs, or who with communities of sex workers. So, and this is coordination and cooperation between between different key populations. But then the second point that I wanted to add, that we need broader coalitions, broader involvement in the human rights and democracy movements in our region and everywhere else. And one here we need to look at maybe sometimes some unconventional allies. For example, migrant communities are a key into pushing for anti-discrimination or increasing xenophobia around the region. And there are good examples of it, of this work where we were able to bring our migrant peers. I am myself a migrant, a people of color living now in a predominantly white society. So other unconventional allies, not unconventional, but maybe occasional allies, would be democracy movement, in a sense that when it comes to for particular legislative initiatives, democracy movements have more experience into pushing for the interests, and they can help us along the way. And this happened in Kyrgyzstan, for example, when in one package of law reform, local conservative party tried to introduce a foreign agent legislation and at the same time anti-homosexuality clause. And it was a really good source for a joint endeavor of local democracy movement and local LGBT movement to step in together against this discriminatory legislation. And we were successful into counteracting it. And finally, I think we need to work closer with business communities. As I mentioned, this study about the effect of homophobia on economic development in India, for example, it is a high-level study, but we need to show the business people on the ground how this homophobia and, in fact, discrimination against all key populations affect or impact their own sustainability, the sustainability of small businesses in small areas. So because we are a big clientele for many of those businesses, and they should use it as just one example.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you. And I like that. Say the idea of looking who are the allies, and allies like unconventional, like migrants, but I think also perhaps allies who are not so like-minded and might look more at the adversaries. And Steve, as you pointed out as well, it's on culture and religion. But when we talk about culture and religion, especially about religion, it is about, and I know the Christian religion very well. I'm a Christian myself, so that's it is the gospel. I think the message of the gospel is the same message as the SDGs. It is leave no one behind, and it is especially say look to those who are left behind by society. Right. And then if I look at Uganda, for example, and I think because what I did, for example, I visited the Vatican, was one of the first visits as a human rights ambassador, to see, we have differences when it comes to SRHR, on abortion or gay marriage, but there's also a lot that we have in common, and that is non-violence and non-discrimination. And I know the Pope visited Uganda as well, and said, well, stop the violence and stop this idiot, witch hunt. Did it have any effect? And do you think the liaison with those who have so much influence in a very Christian society as Uganda might be a way to go?
The Pope's visit was really good, but in our Christian society in Uganda, in our religions, if someone like at a high level, like the Pope, says something, yes, they will listen, but they will prefer to keep quiet and not speak about it. If someone tries to bring it up, they try to just tell them, please don't speak about this, just leave it as it is. So, there is no much big difference that was made. It's just that some churches, like the Catholic churches, just stopped talking about it. But of course, the discrimination, the homophobia still continues back doors. Though nowadays they have reduced talking about it in church, but the discrimination and the phobia continues, and that hasn't made any big change. Yes.
But what else can we do?
I think as a matter of urgency, governments all over Africa and the globe should first move forward to uphold and protect the lives of all their citizens, including members of the LGBT community. We are human and we are people. We are not aliens. And beyond their oral commitments, governments should adopt in writing laws and policies that protect all individuals from discrimination and stigmatization, regardless of an individual's gender identity or sexual orientation. Maybe this will go a long way in ensuring that transgender persons and other members of the LGBTQ community enjoy the same privileges and protections like their heterosexual counterparts, even while accessing health care services. I'll also talk about the donor community. We call you to increase funding towards programs that are aimed at curbing the epidemic amongst lesbians, bisexual women, and transgender persons. We have had a big challenge that we are facing. I don't know whether this is but it's not only in my country, because I've interacted with a lot of people here, and I think this is happening even in different countries. Most of the donors who come on board to support the HIV programs have prioritized mostly, like in the LGBT community, they give priority to gay and MSM people. And they have left out the lesbians, the trans persons, and bisexual women. And I don't know why. This is really something that is challenging, and it's really bad, because how are we going to reach the 90-90 if we are leaving out some people? And who told you that because every time you ask why this is happening, they tell you the LGBTQ community is at a low prevalence of getting HIV. Who told you that? And then they talk about research. Why is it always about numbers? Numbers all the time. Are you waiting for, people to get the HIV so that you can come on board? Why? It's as if you're saying, you know what, go get it, then we shall come in to support you. Yeah, which is not a good thing. Yeah, and this goes to IAS, the organizers of the conference, and all the people who organize such conferences give chances to the LGBTQ community. Our voices are not being heard because we are not involved. We are not given chances to come and speak. This has left us behind, and we have ended up losing. Yeah? So we really need, because if you look at the whole conference, there are just few LGBTQ persons who are represented here, who are representing in this conference, yeah? And who have been given chance to speak. How many are they if you really take a keen note and count? How many are they? How many have come for the conference, and how many have been given chance to speak? Very few. So how shall our voices be heard, and how shall we be included?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jay. Steve, that is also what you were talking about. The lesbians, transgenders, the left behind. While they have you said 49 times higher chance of being infected with HIV, AIDS. So is it about the community they have? That's one thing. And the other one, what I also, when you talk about culture and religion, and especially in your country, well, your country is a good example, where the laws are okay, but culture and religion has such an influence. Is there, a chance of, by the alliance with these people and get into a discussion on them, that you could have more influence? Well, often they are not the most likely, because a lot of people just turn against religion, because religion has so much influence on people's life, also because the interpretation is such a patriarchal interpretation.
Correct.
Often.
That's right, and all of it has to do with behavior of individuals, whether one has knowledge or not. But if we are talking about humanity requires just the basic human being and decency. That's where it starts. And part of religion and culture, if you stick to principles besides the books and the scriptures, because that is what's interpreted. But the principles speaks about values and respect and love and humanity. That requires human decency. And that's where we need to start. How do we coexist and respect one another, regardless of our own practices and our own teaching and so forth? As a human being, you must dig deep in terms of your contribution to human nature and to human nature and decency and on its own. So for me, I think that on its own we must reflect on. But secondly is that when you spoke about how we break the silence and looking at allies, both religion and culture can be looked at as well, and from a positive point, because they play an influence. And if you look at it from the very same principles that I've spoken about, non-judgmental and so forth, it's looking at religion and culture from a positive and how we influence the humanity in our own response. But part of it is about breaking the silence. There's a notion around violence in the silence that we must think about. How we contribute by being quiet. If my neighbor is raped, if my neighbor is beaten, if my child people have a notion that it only when they break the silence is when it happens in their own homes, that they start talking about it. But it starts there at home, but it also starts with your own community. But our response must be from an ecological point of view, right? Because that's very important. There's an individual, the individual's relation, the community they live in, and society at large. And part of it is that how we respond to that. And I think South Africa, we have great lessons that we've learned as a country over time. You know, we've made so many mistakes, we've made so much progress as well. And I think part of it is that what was the resilience in the South Africans themselves that stood up, activists stood up, you know, in different spaces to say, enough is enough. We have decriminalized long time ago, but we have not progressed. And we've seen it, even with pastors who are gay or who are trans or whatsoever. They are breaking the silence to say, this is our space and we will coexist. And I think that's a very important thing. But part of it is that it takes so long because it, again, is about behavior. It's about ignorance. It's about, you know, knowledge that you need to instill every time and remind people. And just what we've done in terms of HIV response for LGBTI. 2 years ago, or last year, South Africa launched first of its kind, the Lgbti HIV Plan. It's a peer-navigated plan that says, yes, we are hearing you. We are now going to take steps and we will respond to the needs of LGBTI persons. But similarly, 2 years ago, we also launched the sex worker plan. Now, sex work in South Africa is still criminalized, but we're then saying, what are the needs of people that we must respond to now urgently? And that's exactly trying to contribute to meeting the global targets that we have. And part of it was that some of these plans, laws take time to change, it's fine. But we're saying, what are the immediate actions that we must have? So the leadership that South Africa has provided was very key for both LGBTI, people who inject drugs, sex workers, to saying we will respond on that. And I want to say that even the challenge that still faces us around violence broadly, and we've seen it, we have quite high rate of rape, hate crimes, and so forth. A few years ago, you know, when South Africa submitted a 10-year report to CEDAW, which is the Convention on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, CEDAW made a recommendation to South Africa. These recommendations went to Parliament. These recommendations were adopted by Cabinet as well, to establishing the National Council on Gender-Based Violence. Of course, any political leader, they come and go, they make changes, and that, you know that what political leaders can, and if something is not the hot cake on the table, it will not be prioritized. But currently, just 2 weeks ago, I mean, we sat with the Minister of Women, we sat with the President, in fact, pronounced to saying we want to revitalize the National Council Against Gender-Based Violence, so which is very key. So while we have a very progressive president, in fact, he's one of the people who really led the constitutional development in the 90s. So for us is that we would want to capitalize on the president because of his priorities in addressing social issues. We want to capitalize with members of the cabinet who are committed. So as much as we have that commitment because of the South African National AIDS Council as well, that puts government to take responsibility. We don't only want to see determination. We want determination, implementation, and investment. Part of that, that's what we have to work out with human behavior. And I think lastly, to capitalize on the point that you've raised earlier about accountable democracy. In fact, you spoke about democracy, you know, in that way. I'm adding the word accountability, because part of it is that everyone will sign a law, and that's what we've seen, but will not move in terms of implementation. Or if they move with implementation, they don't put investment to it. We've seen it, our gender-based violence, it costs South Africa 45 billion to respond to gender-based violence. That's our KPMG report that stipulates 45 billion, which is, it's a percentage of our GDP. So everyone must think about it. Business sector must think about it, because you have to think about the workforce, commodities needed, and every other little thing that is needed to respond to gender-based violence. Now, one thing that I've put across as a thought for South Africa to think, if it cost our country 45 billion to respond to gender-based violence, and earlier I've given the statistics to saying out of 9 women, 1 gets to report a case. So that means it's only these ones that are costing us 45 billion. But if you are to calculate it, you must multiply that by 9, and it will actually tell you how much it costs this country to respond to gender-based violence. So for me, I think it's crucial that each stakeholder, whether in the faith-based business sector, government, civil society, must take responsibility to speak about violence. First, speak about it. Secondly, educate others who don't know about it, but start at a very low level when people are young, in schools. Let's end violence in schools. Because if we don't start it, it will continue. The young ones will become adults. They will be the one that will be raping. They will be the one that will be killing. They will be the one that will be infecting. They will be the one that will be destroying humanity in our own coexistence.
Thank you, Steve. And I think that's a very good thing, because there's violence in the silence, and I think that's a very good thing what you said. And I think we have a lot of points that we can act on, but perhaps some people in the audience have some other ideas. Anybody who would like to take the floor? If not, I mean, we are already over time. Well, I'm very happy with this session, because I know, say, as a human rights ambassador, what to do. I'm asked for more democratic space in your region, Vitaly, because that is one of the things which I think is, that's a threat, shrinking civil space, and that's also not only a threat in your region, it might also be a threat in others.
It's actually closed, Ambassador. Shrinking is something else, but civil society space is being closed.
Yeah.
It's no longer shrinking, but it's being closed because governments are also taking over and trying to push out civil society that speak out.
It's not shrinking by itself.
Even that. Say, asking people to speak out, against violence, especially those people who are, say, coming from a background where violence is being condemned, like religious leaders, for example. And I think your message to the IAS was very clear, Jane. Yeah, to have more people involved, say, from the lesbian and transgender background, say, in the next meeting. So that's a message we can take to San Francisco and Oakland as such. Because
I wasn't finished, but yeah. Yeah. So if you could give me 2 minutes, then I could just wrap it, yeah?
Yeah.
So I'll just quickly wrap it. My next 3 points. So we have seen in this war on drugs among people who use drugs, and I have already told you how the political leaders are using the populist agenda of drugs and all these agendas. So public receptivity is very important. Our moms and dads make up the society. We have to reach out to them. We have to tell them our messages in a language they understand, because we haven't done this yet. We have always been trying so hard to change these laws and policies without even trying to change the perceptions of the public. So that could be one thing that we can do. That is a new thing. So the next thing is we have to change our strategies. 2 decades, 3 decades of harm reduction services hasn't changed even a single law haven't changed the HIV situation among people who use drugs. We have to change these strategies. So maybe other strategies, like other movements could give us some learnings from like ART, access to treatment movements, access to Hep C movement, where these strategic litigations were kind of like taken forward by the communities, lawyers, academics, and everyone together. So this could be one area we could work. And the last thing is, all of us in this, as a key population, we don't know each other, but there is something that connects us together, and that is human rights violations, violence. These kind of things connect us together. So these wrong policies we have to get united. There should be some movement against these criminalizing policies together. From these initiations should be taken from the key populations together, because we have been doing it in silos. Drug users criminalization issue is the matter of drug users, and we will suffer or we will win the advocacy movement. That's our thing. So the gay communities or the MSM communities are like facing crackdown in Indonesia. It's their problem. So we are connected with the criminalization and human rights violations, and I think we haven't done it yet. So we need to get together, and at least criminalization should be fought together. Yeah. I think that is the thing that I wanted to say, yeah. And I had a video which was good, but yeah, we don't have time, so yeah, it was a 2 minutes video on the Philippines. So, but yeah, I won't take time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, because I think one of the things you should link up with Italy, because they set together the networks of all the, the intersectional networks, and I think you can learn from that, because I think, as Vitaly said, so many differences within the region, in the Eurasian region, and they managed to get them together, and I think that's a very good thing. The other thing, what you say, it's about human rights violations. I think the UPR still is a good instrument, and it should be easier to report, but perhaps you could talk about it, because there are easy ways to do that.
Kind of like we get mobile apps updated with they fix bugs every week, kind of like. We haven't updated our policies for 60 years.
Okay. But we can discuss that, say, bilaterally, because I've some ideas on that one.
Yep.
But I think the Human Rights Council, say, still is there, and it's also to let your voice being heard through the UPR. We as the Netherlands, we always pay a lot of attention to this UPR, which is a human rights exam that every country has to go through every 4 years. And these are also occasions to let your voice being heard. Well, thank you very much, all of you, to come over here and to this interesting event. Thank you.